Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts warned on Tuesday that judicial independence is under threat. His annual end-of-year report on the federal judiciary, Roberts wrote, "Within the past few years, elected officials from across the political spectrum have raised the specter of open disregard for federal court rulings. These dangerous suggestions, however sporadic, must be soundly rejected."
Roberts emphasized that though all administrations lose crucial decisions at one point or another, those decisions are still followed. He urged Americans to cherish the rule of law and ensure that it remain intact. In 2018, a federal judge ruled against then-President Donald Trump's policy that restricted migrant asylum seekers at the border. This prompted Trump to call the judge in question an Obama judge. Roberts leapt in to defend the judge and said that there are no such thing as, quote, Obama judges, Trump judges, Bush judges, or Clinton judges.
In 2023, some Democrats said the White House and FDA should ignore a U.S. District Court judge's ruling that the FDA's approval of the abortion drug mifepristone was unlawful. Among those Democrats were Oregon Senator Ron Wyden and New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Yeah, I agree with the Chief Justice. I think you should abide by decisions even if you don't like them, and sometimes they go one way and they go the other. The judges are not, even though Republicans have pretty comfortable control of the Supreme Court right now and for the foreseeable future, the justices do often cross the aisle to agree with someone who's not in their ideological coalition. A great number of the cases are decided like 9-0 or 8-1, so it's not our Supreme Court. While there's a lot of complaints about how partisan it has become, it remains by far the least partisan aspect of government. There still is a lot of working across the aisle and so on and so forth. We don't want to. I would not want to go back to what the Andrew Jackson era of when he famously said the Supreme Court has made their decision. Now let them enforce it. When they tried to stop his expansion into Native American territories, the Supreme Court should be the ultimate law of the land, and people need to abide by their decisions.
I agree with that, but one of the more interesting things about the remarks that Roberts made and the stories that have emerged since then is the idea that he's actually having a bit of a go at J.D. Vance, the Vice President-elect, because Ruth Marcus, columnist for the Washington Post, was pointing out that there are at least 3 occasions since 2021 when Vance has said things that appear to suggest that that Trump or Republicans could in fact defy Supreme Court judgments and that the Supreme Court would be guilty of a sort of overreach of power in various ways. Now that in itself seems interesting, given that there's a conservative majority on the Supreme Court at the moment, 6-3, and more recent judgments or rulings from the court have certainly, I think, been broadly favourable to the President-elect, the most obvious being the one that expanded or drew rather broadly the circumstances in which a president could be immune from criminal prosecution. So that part of it is interesting. There's another element of this report that Roberts issues where he talks about the rising threat to judges from violence and from intimidation. He very emphatically makes the differentiation between people having strong views about
Certainly.
Court rulings and people actually engaging in violence or threatening violence. According to him, the U.S. Marshal Service has identified 1,000 serious threats to judges in just the past 5 years, which is a pretty dispiriting statistic.
Yes, dispiriting. You have every right to criticize judicial rulings. You can protest, in a public space in front of the Supreme Court. You can even protest probably in the neighborhoods that they live in, although I don't particularly recommend visiting people at their homes to protest, but that has happened in the past and is consistent with the First Amendment as long as you're not actually going onto their property or harassing them, and that is fine and is the way it works. I didn't look at J.D. Vance's remarks too closely. I don't really, as you point out, there's really no need for Republicans to go to the Supreme Court right now. They're probably going to have mostly favorable decisions to them for the foreseeable future. Barack Obama, though, famously went after the Supreme Court rhetorically, denouncing many of their decisions that he didn't disagree with and accusing them of becoming too partisan, which drew rebuke from, I believe, from Alito at the time.
During the State of the Union.
It was during the State of the Union with them sitting there. But he has the right to do that, too, although a lot of people were not so pleased about the kind of lecturing way he chose to do it, the optics of it, but he has that right.
No, absolutely. I mean, a lot of these things do cut across partisan lines. You know, I mean, when it comes to the threats issue, there is a man who is pleading not guilty, who is charged with attempted murder, having been found or apprehended armed close to the home of Brett Kavanaugh soon after the Roe versus Wade ruling. One of the details that I had forgotten about until I read some of the reporting on Roberts' remarks was that Justice Amy Coney Barrett, apparently in September, noted or revealed that there was some public engagement she had been involved in where she had been encouraged to wear a protective vest, a bulletproof vest in layperson's terms. That obviously is not the kind of pressure that we want judges on the Supreme Court or any court to be labouring under. Very disturbing that we've reached that sort of a pitch, I think.
Yeah, certainly not. Although, I don't know for sure, based on the report, that that's actually gotten any worse or better. I mean, there are new means of communication. You can't say that, obviously, the justices were not getting harassing emails back in the 19th century. I do wonder if they are actually facing more threats. There are judges who get, attacked or victims of violence, even in a non-political sense, just for making decisions that go, contrary to certain defendants. It happens every now and then. There was that video footage from maybe a year or two ago, I can't exactly remember when, of that judge being tackled by a defendant.
Right, who leapt across.
Yes, I recently saw that person had been sentenced, I think, for that act of violence. Yeah, we don't want to see anything of that nature.
No, we don't. And to your point about the historical patterns or trends or whether the trajectory has changed, Roberts in that report mentions a South Carolinian judge. I'm going from memory here, but I believe the judge was in South Carolina during the time when integration and segregation were such volatile issues. And this particular judge issued a number of rulings that were pro-integration or anti-segregation, had, literally a burning cross on his lawn kind of stuff. So this is not new in and of itself, that there are threats or threatening behavior toward justices. The implication of Roberts' remarks is that it is on the upswing. That number of threats that I mentioned would suggest that it is, and it certainly wouldn't be incongruous with the general issue of sort of greater political bitterness that we were talking about in an earlier segment of today's show.
We'll be back with more Rising right after this.